السلام عليكم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Welcome home, everybody. It's good to see you. Alhamdulillah. Inshallah, we're going to be continuing. Sorry for the little bit of a late start, but we're going to be continuing, inshallah, with our reading of Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, his text on this amazing concept that we've been exploring for the last few weeks, known as zuhud. And this concept, or this trait called zuhud, is something that everybody tries to seek out, right? It's disconnectedness from the material. So it's in some ways being able to exist in this world without having a deep level of obsession with it. Okay? And so some of the scholars, they describe zuhud as being letting the world exist in your hand but not in your heart. So you allow yourself to engage with the dunya because you have to, right? You have to work and you have to take care of yourself and you have to be able to uphold your life. But then at the same time, you're not so invested in it and not so obsessed with it that it occupies your entire existence and your consciousness. And so this status of zuhud, becoming a zahid, it manifests in different ways. And some of the examples that we've given over the past few weeks is that the person who's a zahid is not easily rattled by things. Whether or not things go their way or don't go their way, they don't get disturbed. They don't lose their equilibrium. They don't easily get upset when things are not exactly how they imagine, right? Whether they ordered, chicken or beef, whatever shows up, as long as they're not allergic to it, they'll eat it. They have a lifestyle that is very much spiritually motivated and it's easygoing. So I'm satisfied with what Allah has given me and I'll be pleased with whatever He's decreed to me. Raditu billahi rabba. And I'm pleased with Allah as my Lord. That's the sort of personality that we try to seek from this zuhud. And that's the end goal, right? It's a really, really amazing concept to think about. Can I be somebody that no matter what, I'll be pleased with Allah. I'll be pleased with Him in times of goodness, in times of difficulty, in times of certainty and confusion, in times of anger, in times of, serenity. Can I be pleased with Allah no matter where I am and what's going on in my life? That's a really lofty ideal. So this book was written by Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, and he gave us when you drive from one city to another, there's the mile markers and there's those signs along the way. And so you're really far when the city you're going to is not even on the sign. So you're driving from Dallas to pretty much anywhere in Texas because it's such a big state. And in the beginning of your drive from Dallas to Houston, that sign says Waco and it says other cities, but it doesn't say Houston because you're so far away. But as you get closer and closer to it, the signs become more frequent and the mentioning becomes more frequent and you get closer and closer to your ultimate goal. So Abdullah ibn Mubarak, he wrote this book to tell us what those signs are. How do you know that you're a person that in your journey to achieve this state with Allah, how do you know you're making progress? Because all of us, look, it's Tuesday night, it's 7:20. My assumption is everybody here wants to get closer to Allah. I'm not that funny. I'm funny, but I'm not that funny. Right? This isn't a stand-up session. This is not a Netflix special. So everybody who comes to these gatherings, whether it's here or whether it's at another masjid or they listen to something or they read a book, everyone's intention is the same. How can I get closer to Allah? Well, Abdullah ibn Mubarak, his guidance for us is there's a few things in life that if you work on them and you master them, you will see exponential gains on this journey. You will see so much progress, so much ground covered on this journey to Allah. So the first is the idea of obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obedience is a really, really challenging word. In the English language, you don't see obedience oftentimes coupled with the person that is obeying, right? The one who is subjected to obedience. You rarely see that coupled with love and affection towards the one that they are obeying, right? If somebody says obey me, they're not saying it I love you. It's a command. And it's a reminder of authority, and it's a reminder of placement. It's a reminder of position. You are you, I am me, obey me, right? And that's the unfortunate English, not the translation, but that's like the environment of the translation. But when you look at the obedience that Islam talks about with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in Arabic it's called itta'ah. Itta'ah in Arabic means obedience, but it means obedience in a way where the obedience is one of the languages of communicating your love for the one you're obeying. So I know that I'm going to say something that might trigger some of you right now, but think of a dog. Okay, think of a dog. And I know that, some of us are more scared of dogs than others. There's actually a book written by a scholar that's literally called فضائل الكلاب على كثيرا من لبس الثياب. The virtues of dogs over those who wear clothing. And he wrote this book to talk about there are some traits and characteristics that dogs have that if human beings possess them, they'd be really good Muslims. So I don't know how many, however, I don't know how many of you are familiar with dogs. I'm seeing some people start to sweat profusely. Your parents told you that you were allergic. They meant emotionally allergic, right? To all pets. But if you understand like the culture and the obedience of a dog, you can appreciate this book. For example, the author says that the dog never gets tired of seeing his master. Like the person could leave and then could come back in 20 seconds and the dog is like at the door wagging its tail. You just forgot your keys. You forgot something, and then you can leave again and come back again, and the dog never gets tired of seeing his master. So this author, this scholar is like, what about you and me? The adhan for Fajr, or like, oh, so tired. Adhan for Dhuhr, I was just getting to my rhythm at work. Adhan for Asr, I got it. Adhan for Maghrib, oh man. Adhan for Isha, oh, I was going to watch something. The burden of meeting Allah overwhelms us. That excitement that the dog has, we don't have that. Versus, listen to this, the Prophet ﷺ said, there's a special reward for the servant that sits in between prayers waiting for the next prayer. Like just sits. I want you to think of like, anyone here been for Umrah before? Mecca, Medina, may Allah invite us all. Amazing experience. If you're looking to do something and like kind of shake things up in your life and you need like a little bit, Umrah, when you go to Mecca and Medina, you can push off your next trip to Tulum or wherever it is you're going. Look at Mecca and Medina. And one thing I love about Mecca and Medina, even Ramadan in the States actually, when people are attached to the masjid, that time between Maghrib and Isha becomes like, let me just stay here. When you're in Mecca and Medina, you pray Maghrib and you only have like an hour and 10 minutes till Isha. And it's so crowded, not in a bad way. There's so many people there that you're like, you know what? If I leave and come back, it's just going to be basically me making a lap. Like, why don't I just stay here? Well, what do? I'm going to read some Quran. I'll make some dua. If I'm sitting with some friends, we'll just sit and talk and reflect a little bit. We'll have like an impromptu halaqah with each other. That waiting between prayers, Maghrib to Isha, the Prophet ﷺ said that there's a very special reward for the person who does that. That they sit and they wait. Why? Because who are they waiting for? They're waiting for another chance to meet with Allah. They're waiting. Like the dog waits at the door. On Instagram and TikTok now, people set up these secret cameras, what my dog does after I leave. And it's so sad. The person leaves for work and the dog goes and sits by the door, obedient, waiting for the person to come back. And when I see those videos, I think of that hadith. How many people have it? The other thing is that the dog will obey even if it's difficult. The dog will obey even if it's difficult. The dog will be able to, a good dog, a well-trained dog, even if it sees something it wants, let's say that there's like an animal that's running by and it wants to chase it, if the master says stay, it'll stay. And the owner says get up, it'll get up. If the owner says sit, it'll sit. Owner says shake, it'll shake. The well-trained dog will do what the owner says. Now think of us. Allah says give. وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. Give from what I've given you. And we're like, let me check first. Let me see how much I have. Before I get, I got to make sure that I can still, Allah Ta'ala says, can you fast? Right? Not just Ramadan. Ramadan is there, but do you want to fast a little bit more? Once a month, Mondays and Thursdays, maybe Arafah, Ashura, etc. Like, but I really love my coffee, Allah. Right? And it's so hard. So the bargaining, the dog does not bargain back with the owner. And if a dog barks back at the owner, there's like a special training that they go through. They got to put them in like this dog boot camp. And eventually, if it doesn't work, they're like, you're not for me. Right? May Allah Ta'ala protect us. All that is to say, I'm going to go look up dogs after this now. All that is to say that the obedience of Allah is not something that we frame as being a positive connection with love. Because we feel like obedience in the English language is inextricable from force. But I want you to think for a second outside of the box of the English language at an obedience that is not forced but is motivated by love, motivated by submission, motivated by the desire to please the one that you're obeying. Right? I know when my children, it doesn't happen often, but my daughter, actually, I know exactly when this happens, I can tell you. When my son is getting in trouble for not listening, that's all of a sudden when my daughter starts, yes, Baba. I'll do whatever, Baba. I'm like, Musa, go get ready for bed. He's like, no. Iman's like, I will, Baba. And she walks upstairs. Right? And besides that, she's trying to stick the dagger in him, right? She's like, Besides that, let's say it was happening outside of the context of a fight. What is she doing? She wants to make her dad happy with her. So encouragement to obey Allah is a section in this book in which Abdullah ibn Mubarak is like, look, this is how you can gauge your obedience to Allah. This is how you can gauge it. And truthfully, it's not imposed. Anybody here is more than welcome to do whatever they like. Allah gave us free will. Like I said, you're here on a Tuesday night. There's got to be some reason why you're here. Right? So when we look at our motivations for obeying Allah, let's look and see some of the different narrations and statements. He gave us he built the chapter out of different narrations, and they each had their own meaning. So we're going to try to unpack them as we go through. So he narrates the first section here, this long paragraph, is just the sanad. And I'm not going to say much about a sanad. Sanad in Arabic means chain, right? So if I told you something, then I'm telling you on behalf of someone who told me, on behalf of someone who told them, on behalf all the way back to who? To the Prophet ﷺ. So I want you to understand one thing about the chain of narration that is remarkable. And that is that each name in that chain, if you look at that chain, right, all those names, so we got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. So you got like 10 people in that chain, right? Each of those people, they lived a full life. 70 years, 80 years. You have 10 or 9 generations of people that made it their life's mission to pass on whatever knowledge they could so that somehow, some way in 2023, we could be sitting in Dallas, Texas on November 7th, where it's 84 degrees outside, and we could somehow be reflecting on the words of the Prophet ﷺ. Maybe if we let that sit with us a little bit, the appreciation of each of these people's lives will start to make us feel this sense of just great value for the words that we're about to read. I want you to imagine, like, when you meet someone, they say, like, this is my life's work. They have the diplomas up on the wall, the certifications, this is my life's work. You meet someone in their 70s and 80s, they talk about their legacy. What did I do? Every single one of these people on this list, this is what they did. Their life's work was to pass on knowledge. And they did it solely so that we could benefit from it. Right? This is why when we read their names, we say, may Allah have mercy on them. Because they gave their lives so that we might get closer to Allah. That's it. So he says, Ibn Abbas narrated that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that ni'matan, he says, ni'matan maghbunun fihima kathirun minan nas. That there are 2 things that a lot of people, when it comes to these 2 things, they are deluded and deceived by them. There are 2 blessings that when people experience them, they have a false sense of the 2 blessings. He says, as-sihhatu wal-faragh. He says, number one, siha, good health. When a person's in a state of generally good health. And the second one is al-faragh, which is free time. Or which is when they're not responsible for anything. Farigh. They're free. They have nothing to worry about. This hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions a few things here. Number one is that he says that every single person in their life has these blessings at some point or another. So every single person, when they look back at their life, they will be able to identify a time when they had either one or both of these at the same time. So the believer is operating constantly from a state of gratitude. We understand that Allah has given us things that we did not earn, we don't deserve, and really there's no reason why we should be so entitled or expecting of these things, but we were rather gifted them by Allah. That's what the word ni'mah means. Ni'mah is a blessing that you had no merit in it, right? It's something that Allah Ta'ala just provided for you. And then he says, maghbunun, which means that there is a deception. So these are two blessings and they're great. And there's something that provide a lot of khair and goodness to the life of the person. But as with every blessing, there's another, as they say, there's the double-edged sword. There's another edge to it. And this is a reminder to us that every blessing is in and of itself a provision, but every blessing is also a test. Every single thing that Allah Ta'ala gives us that we perceive to be good can also be the source of our destruction. And that's something that as you get older, you start to realize more and more. How many of you, when you were younger, starting out in your careers, starting out in your life with that trajectory, you looked at the ladder, right, the professional ladder of climbing and promotions and raises and positions, and you looked at it with a lot of like stars in your eyes, right? You wanted to climb that ladder. You wanted to make more money, get that new title, that new promotion, right? Get those responsibilities that came with more compensation, better packages, right? And then subhanAllah, life has an interesting way of doing this, right? The more you graduate and matriculate through those stages, the more responsibility settles onto you and the more stress and anxiety and sometimes even regret you feel. Another example of this, how many of you have ever moved from an apartment to a house? When you have an apartment, it's nice. Something goes wrong, you're like, hey, something's wrong. Like, what'd you do? You're like, doesn't matter, you got to come fix it. You buy a house and you're calling like your dad. You're calling like your friend. Hey, do you know a plumber? What's wrong? I don't know, man. The toilet's not working. Is this supposed to work, right? Home ownership always felt and seemed like such an amazing. How many hours did we spend on Zillow? How much time did we watch TV shows to get ideas about how we're going to decorate, how we're going to furnish? But then you get that house, you get the keys, you feel so excited. And the first time, the second time, the third time things go wrong, you feel, you know what? I kind of missed that apartment, right? Every blessing has its test. Everything that you pray for is also a liability. What makes it a liability is not it, but how you handle it. The wealth that Allah gives you is a blessing, but it's also a test. But it's not inherently a test. It only becomes a test for you if and when you mishandle it, misappropriate it. Are you honest with your wealth? Do you earn it in a way that's halal, that has virtue? Are you stingy or are you generous? Are you magnanimous? Are you somebody that's so open-handed? Do you give your zakat? When you see every year, is it time to pay? Do you pay up? Do you give sadaqah and charity? Wealth is a huge blessing. You're able to pay for your living expenses, your car. You're able to, live a life, a quality that you enjoy. But at the end of every night, when you think about your wealth, are you living up to the haqq that Allah is expecting of you from wealth? So he says, ni'matan maghbunun fihima kathir min an-nas. A lot of people don't realize these blessings when it comes to their possession of them. The two blessings he mentions are health. And this is 30 and up. 30 and up, as I say many times, for those of you who it's your first time here, this is the halaqah of strained backs and knee pain. Heart work is a little younger. You'll notice there's a reason why most of you, like the last chairs to fill up in this halaqah are these. On Monday night, these are the first ones, and then people go back. 30 and up, people are looking for like the couches. They're asking for the squatty potties in the bathroom. Like, there's a lot of different anatomical functions that are not working, and I understand. I'm with you, right? How many of us, I was talking to somebody today. I mean, it's a common conversation as you get older, right? How many of us, you look at yourself and you do the math in your head 10 years ago, 15 years ago, your health was functionally different. It could be your health in general, could be things like weight, could be things like your energy, could be things like your skin. I mean, you name it, right? Look, this isn't a pity party, okay? I don't want us all to go and look at our Instagram 10 years ago and cry. But what I do want us to understand, and again, this is something that I reserve these conversations for Tuesday night because it's a different vibe. Tuesday night is the turning point of your life. 30 and up is when you realize that this life is not meant to be forever. You know, at Heartwork, I can't say that. At Heartwork, I can't turn it into heartbreak. It has to be motivational. It has to be optimistic. It has to be uplifting. Can't get too serious. 30 and up, we all limped in here fully aware that we see that there's something beyond this life. Whether it's like losing somebody in our family, right? When you're 30, when you're 35, when you're 30, when you're 40, you start to lose not only parents of your friends, but you start to lose your friends. You pray janazah not only for your friend's mom and dad, but maybe one or two of your friends, you attend their janazah. Right? That's 30 and up. That's a different experience. You know? You start to understand the effects of when people have deep challenges in their life, personally, financially, medically. It all starts to, the awareness really, it exponentially grows. And so siha, when the Prophet ﷺ said that this is one of the blessings that you'll have that most people don't realize and they're deluded by it, it is absolutely the case that as you get older and as you realize your health is waning, you start to understand the nature of this life. One of the scholars, he wrote that one of the reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed your health on the trajectory that it is in, generally, right? Like obviously we all aspire to be healthy and may Allah ta'ala make us healthy until our last days. And may Allah ta'ala make us healthy even as we're passing. May Allah ta'ala make it not a low quality of life, but a high quality of life. For us and for our loved ones. Ameen ya Rab. You know, the Prophet ﷺ would make dua against certain states that were degraded in physical and mental wellness. He would ask Allah to protect him from these things because they can be very difficult for you and for the people around you who love you. But generally speaking, even outside of those states, there is a general normative degradation of quality of life. Some of the scholars say that your life, as you get older, is a reminder that every pain you feel is a reminder that your body will eventually stop working. Some scholars even said that your life actually mimics the day. When you're born, it's like Fajr. You start your day early in the morning. You have all this opportunity. The world is your oyster, which is a phrase I never understood, but I'll say it. The world is open for you. You can do whatever you want. You can accomplish anything. Don't you guys feel so productive when you look at your list of things to do and the clock says 7 a.m.? Don't you feel like, man, there is nothing that I'm not going to get done today? And then by Dhuhr, you've only done 1 out of 11 things because you were distracted because you kept scrolling for 3 hours and you made coffee twice. You're like, where did the day go? The scholars say Dhuhr is when you reach maturity in your life. You had that moment of Fajr to Dhuhr, and you reach this point of maturity. Then Asr is sort of like the downfall of the day. Golden hour, right? Things start to wrap up. It seems like the earth actually is going back to a resting state. Between Fajr and Dhuhr to Asr, there's a lot of activity. And then once you hit Asr, especially Hanafi Asr, because a little later. Once you hit that point, it seems like the world is going back to a resting state. And that's the nature of kind of like the state of where we are. 30 and up is like Asr time. And then you got Maghrib, which is like the twilight years. That's what they call them. Kind of walking off into the sunset. You're no longer the primary focus. You're not the principal of your life anymore. Now you got like teenage kids, college kids. You're responsible for that. They're actually more so your focus than even yourself. And then Isha comes and that's the closing of your life. Just like it's the last prayer of the day. So some scholars, they said that every day that we pray our salah, no matter which prayer we're in, we should be reminded of the fickle nature of time. And the fickle nature of our health as it relates to the time that we have. When we were younger, we could stay up longer. We could pull all-nighters. We could travel with less. We don't need as much, creature comforts to get by. When you're younger, everything is easier. As you get older, things start to get more challenging. When you look at your life 10 years ago versus now, and then you look at your life now versus 10 years later, as-suha really makes a lot of, subhanAllah, it opens up a lot of doors of realization. And so what then is the responsibility of a person when they look at their health? The responsibility is to look at what they lost and not become despondent, not despair. Look at what they've passed and use that to motivate themselves to use what they have now. Take advantage of the time that you have now. And then he says, wal faragh. When you're younger, you seem to have all the time in the world. As you get older and responsibilities start tacking on, before you know it, the day that you just started with all this optimism and all this aspiration, that day's already ending. Before you know it, your week is done. Before you know it, the months are flying by. 2023 is almost over. SubhanAllah. That's the nature of when you get older. The next narration, Abdullah Mubarak, he includes it here. It's a famous narration. And many of us probably have heard it to some degree. We'll go through this and it'll probably take us, we'll do these two more inshallah. He says, Amr ibn Maymun al-Awdi said that the Prophet ﷺ said to a man that he was exhorting, like he was reminding this man of something. He says, اغتنم خمسا قبل خمس. اغتنم means to take something and to benefit from it. To capture something. Make sure that you don't lose it. Right? Make sure you don't let it drift away. Take advantage of, he said, of 5 things before 5 things. How many of you have heard this hadith before? Roughly. Okay. It's a beautiful hadith. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, he said, the first thing is, shababaka qabla haramika. Take advantage of your youth before you get old. And we just went over that. Make sure that you take advantage of your youth before you get old. Now, here's the crazy part of this hadith. Well, not the crazy part, but the profound part is that instead of becoming, again, like anxious and fearful and regretful over what you've lost, the whole goal is to motivate you to realize that you're actually in your youngest moment right now that you'll ever be. Like today in this moment is the youngest you'll ever be for the rest of your life. And so instead of looking and saying, oh man, right, I should have done this, I should have done that, you look and you say, what can I do? SubhanAllah, I was at Hajj, and I'll never forget, man, this auntie who made Hajj with us, she was elderly, and she needed a lot of help. And she was in a wheelchair for most of the time. She was being pushed by one of the young brothers, not her relative. He just showed up by himself. If you go to Hajj with, well, not anymore with us, but RIP Saudi Arabia. But if you ever went to Hajj with Qaram, what happens basically is that you arrive and the group is there. There's a lot of people that know each other and a lot that don't. And Sheikh Mubin Kamani would oftentimes look at the younger guys in the group and he would assign them as being like the servants of the group. He's like, you guys have faragh, right? You're young, you're healthy, you're 22 years old. Baba paid for your Hajj. Come on, you're gonna get pizza for everybody. Like, we're going to make you're the mule of the group, right? So there was one guy, and I remember he came and he was like, mashallah, he basically came to us and said, if there's anyone who needs anything, like medicine, water, like whatever, just tell me. I'm free. He's like, I'm single, I'm not married. This is a long time ago. He's like, I'm happy to help in whatever way. So Sheikh Mubin saw this elderly auntie whose kids sent her and just kind of like, were like, Bismillah, you know, you're going to Allah's house. Like, I think it'll be fine. Don't get me started on that. God. So he looks at her and she like can't find her bags. Like it's a mess. It's Hajj. Like it's the airport is crowded. She can't. And he looks at this guy and he's like, welcome, meet each other, right? Meet each other. And you're going to be taking care of auntie for the whole trip. And he was not, you know, he was very responsive to the idea. He loved the concept of like, this is my khidmah. I'm going to take care of this auntie, and you know, my mom couldn't come, so I'm going to take care of her as if she's my mother. So he takes care and he does everything, right? Like takes her to the masjid for prayer, drops her back off at her hotel room after, like make sure everything's good. Really, really good brother, mashallah. And I remember at one point he called us and he said, I need you guys to come. Like Mufti Kamani was there, I was there, Sheikh Mubin. I need you to come talk to her. We said, what's wrong? He goes, she's been really, really sad. It's been a couple days. She's been really sad. I don't know if she's homesick. I don't know what's going on. So we said, okay. So we made time during one of the meals. We went and we sat at her table and we started to talk to her. And she was just very quiet, very sad. So we asked her, you know, what's going on? And she said, we said, do you miss your family? She goes, no. I was like, okay, all right. All right. Like she goes, no, I love being here. I love being here. We're like, do you want to go back home? Like, what is it? You know, just tell us. And she's like, no. And then she said something I'll never forget, man. SubhanAllah. She said, I'm so regretful that I waited so long to do Hajj. And she goes, I can't help but think what kind of Hajj I would have made if I were younger. You know, she goes, I see all you guys, you're so young and this and that. She goes, and I think to myself, I can't even walk like I used to. And she's like, I'm so grateful that I'm here, but I'm also filled with remorse and regret. And you know, we told her, we said, no, this is Allah's timing for you. And think about it, like, mashallah, you're here and Allah put you with our group so we could take care of you. Like, don't feel bad. But the lesson she had, you can't deny that there was some wisdom in it. She was displaying to us our own future. We're all going to have regrets, guys. Every single one of us. The goal in life is to minimize the regret. You can't not have regret. That's impossible. But the goal that you and I have is that maybe by Allah's mercy, we'll be able to live our life in a way with sincerity and His tawfiq that we will minimize the regret that we feel. And the regret that we have won't be because of our own negligence and our own mistakes. It'll be because of circumstances that we couldn't control. And we'll say, oh Allah, like I was put there and it was very difficult for me and I failed, but Allah, I regret that. As opposed to regret because of flagrant neglect. I didn't care. Right? What's the number one emotion on the Day of Judgment? If you look in the Quran, the number one emotion of the people of Jahannam, of hellfire, the word that they use is ya hasrata. They use the emotion is not anger. It's not even sadness. It's like deep, heavy, burdensome regret. Ya laytani kuntu turaba. On the day when Allah, so that phrase, oh, would I have been dust. You know why they say that? Because everything that won't receive judgment on the Day of Judgment, every creation that won't be judged, no hisab, no accounting for it. When the trumpet is blown, it turns to dust. So like the trees, right, the animals, everything that doesn't have a moral responsibility will turn to dust. So when the people who are filled with regret see that everything around them is dust and they're left and they realize, I'm going to be judged now. Now's my time. I have to go and I have to give my book to Allah, and Allah's going to ask me, Ya laytani kuntu turaba. I wish I was that animal that just turned to dust. I would be in a better place if I were dust than if I were who I was today. So that regret is something that, again, we want to avoid that. We want to avoid that. You know, we live our lives in the concept of regret. We think of missed opportunities. Oh man, I wish I took that job. I wish I got that house. I wish. That's actually, a lot of that is from shaitan. The stuff that you couldn't control anyways, right? The house that someone outbid you on. The job that someone else knew the hiring manager, man. Doesn't matter if you applied, you were never getting it, right? The person who got married and, it wasn't in your nasib to marry that person. Those are the things that we regret. But you know what the Quran talks about regretting? Not things that we thought we should have gotten and didn't. It's things that we should have done and we didn't do. That's the basis of our regret. I wish I prayed. I wish I used my time better. I wish I gave. Allah gave me wealth. I wish I gave. Right? So he says what? He says, Shababaka qabla haramika. And then he says, Wasihhataka qabla saqamika. He says, your health before your sickness. And again, this is another generalized statement. He's not saying that you're going to get sick like today or tomorrow and what sickness it is. But he says, look, the reality is part of the design of Allah of our bodies is that the end of our life includes what we call sickness, but really it's just the ending. It's the final chapters. It's interesting. They say they have all these medical terms and they have to. I understand. I'm not trying to rip into the medical community. But we have all these medical terms for describing death, but really it's all the same in a lot of ways, right? Failure. The reality is that our runway off of this dunya, away from here, no matter what organ it is that fails, it all includes the same thing, which is that something will stop working. And eventually the heart and the soul will leave the body. And I was telling my son Musa, because we were in Turkey, he saw the graveyard there, the cemetery, and he was like, what's that? And I had to explain a grave. And then he starts asking about graves, and it's really, really, I was panicking because I'm like, how am I going to explain to this 5-year-old, this 6-year-old, what death is? And then I say, I didn't know how to explain it at that moment with the nuance that I would, but I said, when people get very old, which is not true, of course, and people get very old, then their bodies generally stop working, and then their soul leaves and their body stays. So, of course, the first thing he does is he brings up his grandma. He's like, is she next? And we're like, and he's not being mean. He's just like, okay, old. So is it? And I'm like, relax, right? And don't ever say that to her. So I'm like, no. She's fine. And then between us, right? This year she did have health problems, and my wife and I did talk, subhanAllah, about the nature of how that loss will be for him. He loves his grandma. So he might have known, subhanAllah. So the reality is that is the description really in bijumla, that in just a sentence, that's the description of our end, right? And sickness is just a way for us to understand the end of our life. But really, it's just the end. The angel of death arrives and he removes your soul. And for the good soul, he takes it out like water. May Allah make us a good soul. And for the soul that has a lot of rejection of Allah and a lot of, they repel the soul that pushed Allah away its whole life with no regret, no tawbah, no feeling, that soul, the Prophet ﷺ said it's going to be pulled out like wool is pulled through a comb. It's not going to want to leave. It's going to realize, no, this is the end. I don't want to leave. But the one who is in a good place with Allah, that soul is actually when the angel of death comes, the angel of death shows up as a beautiful, handsome angel speaking with so much charisma and honor to the soul. Come on. Allah is ready to receive you now. Come. But for the one that is wretched, the angel of death comes down with this harshness and says, wretched soul, you're going to go to your reckoning now. All the time that you ignored your Rabb, now it's time for you to answer for it. So make sure you take advantage of your health before your sickness. And he says, وَغِنَاكَ قَبْلَ فَقْرِكَ, and your wealth before you are poor. This also doesn't mean only financially. This can mean, ghina means being free of need, which we often associate with money. If people have money, they're free of need. But that's not always the case. Ghinaka means your freedom, your needlessness. Take advantage of that before you are what? Faqrika, before you are immersed in neediness. So it could mean financially. That's the case, subhanAllah. It can be that case. but it also could mean generally a person and how they perceive their own needs. And all of these really are, a summary of that. And he says, وَفَرَاغَكَ قَبْلَ شُغْلِكَ, and your free time before you are occupied. Make sure that you don't waste your time. He's not talking about like relaxing. A lot of times when we talk about wasting time, people are like, Islam doesn't let me relax. That's not true, right? Recreation, the Prophet ﷺ used to laugh with his companions. He used to sit around and tell stories. That's like us sitting and hanging out and talking over tea and gathering late into the night. That's no problem with that. What this is referring to is whatever it is you're doing, if you had to zoom out of that moment, right? If you almost had like an out-of-body experience, you zoomed out in that moment and you looked at what you were doing, if you were watching that moment on the Day of Judgment with Allah explaining it, would you be proud or would you be shameful? That's wasted time. Wasted time is time that you would be ashamed to explain to Allah, because everything is going to be laid out. وَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ بِيَمِينِهِ. Like everyone's going to be given their books. And they're going to have to, we're all going to have to go through. Imagine, it's crazy. Like all of these ayat were sent down pre-modern, right? Like times with no technology, no recording. Everything was verbal, like oral memory or oral record with memory. I want you to imagine, like now we have like security cameras. We have phones. We have your keys. Like if you have like a security card on your keys, like my security system tells me when a door opens, and I can print out that record. Literally, I can hit the button. It'll make a document. It'll show me today on Tuesday, November 7th. This is every time your door and garage opened. I can do that. So you don't think that on the Day of Judgment, like Allah can also do that? You don't think that there's... back then, in the time of Wahy, revelation, they're like, how? For us, we're like, oh God. Everything can be preserved. If you've seen like The Social Dilemma, that documentary on social media, every one of your searches is recorded. Everything you've watched, even TikTok, Instagram, they know how long you watch something for. Like they know how long, they know if your thumb stops scrolling, and they measure the time that all of us have talked about something and then gotten an ad for it, right? All of us have talked, I'm going to say it, all right? Memory foam pillows. Let's see. Next week, come and tell me how many of you on Instagram are going to have a Sealy ad for memory foam pillows now, because they're listening. So if we are it's not difficult for us to imagine a world where we're being watched. We acknowledge it. Your phone knows where you go, right? Apple, on these iPhones, if you give it permission, it'll know your schedule just by your position and the time. If every Wednesday you go to the gym at 6 p.m., at 5:55, a suggestion will pop up. Go to the gym. You never put it in your calendar, but it knows, because for 6 straight weeks, on Wednesday at 6 p.m., that's when you got in your car and you left. Ajib. So you don't think that Allah Ta'ala can do the same thing, if not better? Of course, right? So when we look at wasted time, it's the time that we will be ashamed to explain to Allah. Now, here's the beautiful part, is that if we feel that shame now, we can actually do something about it. The shame won't do anything there. If we feel remorseful now, we can say, oh Allah, forgive me for that. And Allah will forgive. That's the beautiful part. His promise is that He will. You're not begging for forgiveness from one that doesn't want to forgive. You're begging for forgiveness from the one who tells you, ask and I will forgive. Just ask. So he says, وَفَرَاغَكَ قَبْلَ شُغْلِكَ وَحَيَاتَكَ قَبْلَ مَوْتِكَ. And the end of it all of the summary of this is, use your life before you die. Because the one thing that you can do now that you can't do when you're dead is you can actually change the destiny of where your eventual trajectory spiritually will be. But once a person passes away, the Prophet ﷺ says, إِذَا مَاتَ إِبْنُ آدَمْ إِنْقَطَعَ أَعْمَالُهُ. That when the person dies, the son or the daughter of Adam, all of their deeds are done. They're cut off. Illa min thalath. And this is crazy because these three things that still benefit you after you die, they're actually just things you did when you were alive. He says what? He says number one, sadaqatun jariyatun. A good charity that carries on. Something you did that keeps going after you pass. So let's say you donated to something, an institution, or you built something, a resource that keeps providing benefit even after you're gone. That's called sadaqah jariyah. It could be a well, it could be a school, it could be a masjid, it could be anything. It could be anything. Maybe you bought somebody a prayer rug and they're using it. Maybe you gave them a Quran mushaf and they're reading it. Like anything that keeps going after you die. Number two, he says, ilmun yantafa'u bihi. Knowledge that you gave to somebody that's beneficial. Maybe you taught somebody something that they didn't know before. Think of everybody, think in this room, who taught you how to pray? Just put that person in your head. Who taught you how to pray? And if they've passed away and you feel disconnected from them, realize that every time you pray, you're connecting with them. The Prophet ﷺ said that when you do good deeds and the person who benefited from your good deeds, when that good deed is happening, let's say my grandmother, Allah yarhamha, she passed away. Let's say she taught me how to pray. Every time the time for prayer comes and I go pray, the angel goes to her in the grave and brings to her this feast of food. You know, mango. She was Egyptian. She loved mangoes. Mangoes. And the person asks, what is this? And the angel says, you remember you taught Abdurrahman how to pray when he was a kid? He just prayed. Right? Some knowledge, something you taught. This is why, you know, whenever I asked one time my Sunday school teacher why she did what she did, and she said, because hopefully when I die, everything you guys do, I'll get the reward for it. And I was like, that's selfish but genius, right? Okay? And the third is وَلَدٌ صَالِحٌ يَدْعُو لَهُ, the righteous child that'll pray for you. You know, which is something you did in this life. You know, you just want your children to pray for you, right? And so you construct that relationship and you invest decades of your life so that your children will pray for you. And think about now, for those of you who you have, you know, your parents, like they did that with you. How much do you pray for your parents? Right? Especially if they're not here. May Allah have mercy on anyone whose parents have passed. If they're not here, like that's what they need from you. They need those prayers. They feel those prayers. The hadith tells us that they receive updates when you pray for them. So if you feel, again, like, I can't, how can I help them? They're gone. I'm here. You can. You absolutely can. Sadaqah jariyah, knowledge, and prayer. Right? Use hayataka qabla mautika. Use your life before you pass. We ask Allah Ta'ala to give us the wisdom and the knowledge of these two narrations. We ask Allah Ta'ala to give us the ability to practice whatever we've said and whatever we've heard. We ask Allah Ta'ala to forgive us for our shortcomings and to allow us to be people that take advantage of our life before our life ends. We ask Allah Ta'ala to give relief and ease to the people of Palestine and Gaza. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to uplift from them their oppression. We ask Allah Ta'ala to raise their voices and to allow their case to be heard. We ask Allah Ta'ala to grant them His justice in this life and the next. And we ask Allah Ta'ala to use His subordinates, those people that He has given the position of leadership and the charge of responsibility, that Allah Ta'ala places within their hearts the courage and the mercy and the ability to provide relief and safety and determination to the people of Palestine, to the people of Gaza, and all of those who are being oppressed all over the world. Ameen, ameen, ya Rabbil Alameen. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Inshallah, Isha prayer is in just about 8 minutes, inshallah. If you want, you can walk through here. You can go through this way, or you can go around, inshallah, either way. Jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. If everyone who is sitting on the back jacks could do me a favor and just line it up nicely over here for me, and over here as well, that'd be great. And if you sat in any of the furniture, if you don't mind just rearranging it back to the way that it's typically set up, I'd really appreciate that. Barakallahu feekum, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. No, no, no.
Okay,
You're
okay,
good.
that's good. But I think everything meant, I think it was a little too much for me.
Oh,
Because
okay.
I feel immensely tired.
Hmm.
Like I was almost here last night. I didn't come to you. I've been over here. And I feel immensely tired.
But remember what I said at the end. It's not the regret you feel. It's the motivation to just do things from now. It's the motivation to do things from now. I know, I know.
Yeah. But I feel like I'm an easy target person. That's all.
Yeah.
But I'll try to be not regretful.
Inshallah.
And now I'm
Inshallah.
coming.
Inshallah. That's good. That's good.
Is that
Exactly.
rough or
It's all about incremental growth. That's
yeah.
it.
And I
That's it.
couldn't talk to my boss today.
Oh, okay. It's
But
okay.
yeah, but
It'll come.
tomorrow.
The time will come, inshallah.
Yeah, it's just the suspense is a little.
Yeah, yeah. I
But
understand.
I'll try to be soft, like you said.
Inshallah. Inshallah.
Jazakallah.
Wa yakum, wa yakum. Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Thank you so much.
No, alhamdulillah.
It's
Jazakallah khair.
been,
Appreciate it.
my wife and I started coming here 2 months,
Oh, wow. Okay.
and we look forward.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you so much.
Alhamdulillah. No, thank you.
May Allah grant you all the blessings.
Ameen,
Thank you
ameen.
for being a good teacher,
No, no.
bringing us closer to Allah.
Ameen.
Really,
Ameen.
really.
Jazakallah khair.
I will talk to you later on when we have time.
Sure.
I wanted to do some kind of charity thing,
Sure.
but I wanted to link it with the revenue we're generating through Roots
Sure.
to
Yeah.
Palestine. I'll talk to you.
Let's do it. Yeah, yeah. Let's do it, inshallah. Maybe next week we can sit down after and chat for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I came yesterday. My wife said you need to come to Monday lecture. But I said I don't want to miss out my Tuesday.
Oh, that's
So
horrible. Okay.
we both are here today.
Oh,
but
alhamdulillah.
we will talk. And
Inshallah. Inshallah. What's your name one more time?
Bilal.
Bilal, mashallah. Good to meet you, Bilal. Good to see you, alhamdulillah. Take care, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. I'm sorry. Assalamu alaikum. I'm going to head to the masjid for salah, inshallah, so I'm going to turn off the lights. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. All right? All right, assalamu alaikum.